There is a specific kind of meeting that most people have experienced at least once in their life. Not the ordinary kind, not the handshake at a work event or the introduction at a party that you forget by the time you get home. A different kind. The kind where something shifts the moment they speak directly to you. Where you find yourself thinking, before any rational basis exists for the thought, that you already know this person. Not know about them. Know them. From the inside. From somewhere that predates this conversation, this room, this life. You felt this, and you've never had a satisfying explanation for it. Not chemistry. Chemistry is something you develop. This was already there. Not projection. Projection requires a template from your past. This felt older than your past. Not coincidence. Because what happened between you and that person, what has continued to happen, has been too specific, too precisely calibrated to be the work of random chance. What if it wasn't random? What if the pull you felt toward that specific person, in that specific moment, was your soul recognizing something it already knew, something that had been known for far longer than this lifetime? This video is about that recognition, what causes it, what it means, and why. The people who trigger it in you are almost never in your life by accident. We are going to look at 7 specific signs that you have met someone from a past life, not as a checklist to run through casually. Each sign is a window into something ancient and precise about how souls travel through time and why they keep finding each other. By the time we reach the end, the people in your life who trigger these signs, the ones who have always felt different from everyone else, will make a different kind of sense. Not the comfortable kind of sense, the true kind. Stay with me. The first thing to understand before we get to the signs themselves is what a past life connection actually is. Not the romanticized version, the real mechanism. Paramahansa Yogananda described the soul's journey through lifetimes with a precision that most spiritual teachers avoid because it is too specific to be easily dismissed. He wrote that souls who have shared significant karma, significant action, and consequence across multiple lifetimes develop what he called a karmic bond, thread of unresolved energy that pulls those two souls back toward each other across incarnations. Not because the universe is romantic, because karma is a mechanism, and unresolved mechanisms seek completion. The intensity you feel when you meet someone from a past life is not sentimental. It is functional. Your soul is recognizing the presence of unfinished work, of something that was started in another chapter and was never quite brought to completion. The recognition arrives before the mind has any information to justify it, because it is not coming from the mind. It is coming from something older than the mind, something that remembers what the mind has forgotten. That is what we are going to map, sign by sign, the specific ways that ancient recognition announces itself in the middle of an ordinary life. Sign 1. You feel like you have known them before, but you cannot say from where. This is the most common report and the most consistently dismissed one. People call it déjà vu. They call it chemistry. They call it a feeling and leave it at that. But there is something specific about past life recognition that separates it from ordinary familiarity. And when you hear it described precisely, you will know immediately whether you have experienced it. It is not the feeling of having met someone similar before. It is the feeling of having met this exact person before. A specificity to the familiarity that ordinary chemistry cannot account for. The way they hold their silence, the particular rhythm of how they think, the specific texture of their presence in a room. You recognize all of it, not as things you have seen before in other people, but as things you already know about this person, as if you are remembering rather than discovering. Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia, who has spent decades investigating past life memories in children, documented something that is relevant here. The children in his cases who carried verifiable past life memories did not just remember facts about previous lives. They recognized people. Specifically, a child would meet a stranger and say, without prompting, without any possible prior exposure, "You used to bring me water." The child would see an elderly person and describe in detail the relationship they had shared in a previous life. The recognition preceded the information. Every time. This is the structure of sign 1. The knowing arrives before the data, before the explanation, before anything. The rational mind can point to as a justification. You have met someone and felt immediately, specifically, without being able to say why, that you already know them from somewhere older than this lifetime. That feeling is worth taking seriously, not as proof, as information. Sign 2. The relationship moves at an unusual speed, not romantic speed, depth speed. With most people, depth develops gradually. Trust accumulates over time. You share small things first, then slightly larger things, and over months or years you arrive at genuine intimacy. With a past life connection, this process is compressed in a way that feels almost disorienting. Within hours or days of meeting, you are telling this person things you have not told people you have known for years, not because you have decided to trust them, because the trust was already there. The defenses that normally govern how much you reveal and to whom do not fully activate around this person. You find yourself speaking from a level of honesty that you do not typically access this quickly, and the other person matches it because their defenses are not fully activated around you either. You are not building trust. You are resuming it, picking up a thread that was already established in another context, and the soul recognizes this even when the mind is still catching up. The disorientation this produces is worth paying attention to. When you find yourself thinking, I shouldn't be this comfortable with someone I just met, that dissonance between what the mind expects and what the soul already knows is itself a sign. Sign 3. There is an intensity to the connection that feels disproportionate. Not necessarily positive intensity. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it is conflict. Sometimes it is a specific irritation, the kind that is too precise, too targeted to be accounted for by anything that has happened in this relationship. Yogananda was explicit about this. Karmic bonds do not only produce warmth, they produce whatever the unresolved karma requires. The unfinished business between two souls involves conflict. The meeting in this life will carry the residue of that conflict, even before a single word has been spoken. You have met people like this, people who irritated you immediately, not because of anything they said or did, something more subtle, a quality in their presence that activated a very specific response in you before you had any rational basis for it. This is not a personality clash. This is karma recognizing karma. The intensity, whether warm or difficult, is the signal. A connection feels significantly more charged than its duration or context should warrant. You are in the presence of something that has history, more history than this lifetime contains. Sign 4. You dream about them in ways that feel different from ordinary dreaming. Most dreams dissolve quickly. After waking, the emotional residue fades. You might remember fragments, an image, a feeling, but the coherence disappears. Dreams about past life connections tend to have a different quality. They are more vivid, more coherent. They carry an emotional weight that does not fade with waking the way ordinary dream emotions do. And frequently they do not look like your current life. Different settings, different clothing, different versions of you and the other person, but unmistakably the same relationship. The Indian tradition calls these smriti dreams, remembrance dreams. The Tibetan tradition identifies a specific category of dream in which the subconscious mind accesses what is stored in the subtle body, the layer of the self that carries karmic impressions across lifetimes. What these dreams often contain is not narrative. It is not a clear story with a beginning, middle, and end. It is emotional information, the felt texture of a relationship that the conscious mind has no access to. The warmth, the grief, the specific quality of love or loss, or betrayal, arriving in the only form the sleeping mind can receive it. If you have had recurring dreams about a specific person that feel older than your history with them, that is worth sitting with, not as evidence of anything, but as the subtle body communicating something that the waking mind has been unable to access. Sign 5. You have an inexplicable knowing about them, not knowledge you have gathered, knowing you arrived with. You understand something about their interior life, their fears, their particular blind spots, the specific ways they protect themselves that you should not be able to understand this quickly. They have not told you these things. You have not observed them long enough to have assembled this picture through normal means. But you know, and frequently you are right, which is the disorienting part. When you say something about a person you have just met, something interior and specific, and they look at you with an expression that says you have seen something they thought was invisible. That convergence between your inexplicable knowing and their lived reality is not coincidence. It is the residue of having known each other in a different context, having navigated each other's interior landscape before, in another life long enough that the knowledge was encoded in the subtle body and carried forward. The soul does not forget what it has learned. Even when the mind cannot access the memory, the knowing remains, and it surfaces in flashes, in intuitions, in the specific accuracy of a perception that arrives without a rational source. This is not psychic ability. This is soul memory. The difference is significant. Psychic ability is a sensitivity to something external. Soul memory is the retrieval of something that was already yours. You have ever known something about a person that you had no rational basis for knowing and been correct. You have experienced this sign. Sign 6. The relationship has an unusual ease or an unusual difficulty with silence. This is a subtle sign, and because of its subtlety, it tends to be the most reliable. With most people, silence requires management. You fill it or you sit with a low-level discomfort while it stretches. Silence with a stranger is almost universally awkward. Silence with an acquaintance is merely neutral. Silence with a past life connection is different in a way that is immediately recognizable once you know to look for it. It is inhabited, not empty. The silence between you and this person carries the same quality as speech. It does not need to be filled because it is not actually empty. There is something present in it, a shared understanding that exists below the level of words. This happens because genuine intimacy accumulated over multiple lifetimes operates at a frequency below language. You have shared so much with the soul across so many iterations of relationship that the wordless space between you is already full. The other form of this sign is its opposite, the silence that is charged rather than inhabited, tense rather than full. A silence where something unsaid is present, not because either of you is withholding in this life, but because there is something between you that predates this life and has never been resolved. You will recognize which version you have experienced. Sign 7. The relationship changes you in ways that other relationships have not. Not necessarily changes you for the better. That is the part that takes honesty to sit with. Past life connections are not defined by their comfort. They are defined by their precision. The changes they produce in you are changes that were needed, changes that other relationships, however loving or stable, could not produce because those other relationships did not press on the specific karmic grooves that this person reaches. You become different in the presence of this person, not a performance of difference, an actual alteration. Something in you that was fixed loosens, something that was defended becomes accessible, or in the case of a more difficult karmic connection, something in you that was hidden becomes impossible to hide. Both versions are the same sign. When a relationship produces in you a change that feels more like excavation than addition, when you feel like this person is not giving you something new but uncovering something old, you are in the presence of a past life connection doing what it was designed to do. Yogananda called these relationships karmic mirrors. They show you the parts of yourself that other mirrors cannot reach, not because the person holding the mirror is particularly wise or kind, but because the karmic angle between you positions them precisely to reflect back exactly what you most need to see and cannot refuse to see, because the love is too real, or the conflict is too precise, or the recognition is too old. Whatever the specific nature of the connection, you cannot look away from this person the way you can look away from most people. And the inability to look away is itself the sign. Karmic work is not optional. It arrives with the quality of necessity that ordinary relationships do not carry. Now, before we go further, let me tell you about two people whose story illustrates all 7 of these signs. Not a story from ancient tradition, a story from this century. Her name is Maya. She was 34 years old when she met him at a conference in Chicago. She almost did not attend. She had already decided to leave early. The session was running long. She was tired. Then he walked into the room, and she had the thought, specific, immediate, unwelcome, in its clarity, that she had been waiting for this person for a very long time. Not in the romantic sense. She would have preferred to assign it something older than romance, something that arrived with the weight of something unfinished rather than something new. His name was Rohan. He was from a different city, a different field, a different world. There was nothing in the information about him that should have produced this response. Everything in the situation was ordinary, except what she felt. She described it later as the experience of watching a door open that she had not known was there. Not a door to him, a door to something in herself that had been closed since before she could remember. They spoke for 3 hours that evening, not because either of them had planned, but because stopping felt genuinely difficult in a way that neither of them could account for. By the second conversation, she was telling him things she had never told anyone, not because she had decided to trust him, because the conversation had simply gone there, as if the ordinary rules of how depth develops did not apply between them. He said at one point, "I feel like I'm catching you up on something, not introducing myself." She knew exactly what he meant. Over the following year, their connection deepened in the specific way that past life connections do. Not steadily, not comfortably, but with an intensity that seemed to bypass the ordinary stages of relationship development entirely. There were stretches of extraordinary ease, silence, that neither of them felt the need to fill, an ability to disagree without damage that neither of them had found in other relationships. And there were stretches of extraordinary difficulty, conflicts that arrived from nowhere with a force disproportionate to their immediate cause, moments where the other person pressed on something so specific, so deeply interior that the reaction that surfaced felt ancient rather than current. Maya told me later, the hardest conversations we had never felt like they were about what we were saying they were about. They felt like they were about something we couldn't name, like we were finishing an argument that started somewhere we couldn't remember. This is the structure of significant karmic work in a relationship. The content of the conflict is not the conflict. The content is the vehicle. Underneath it is something older, pressing for completion. 3 years after they met, Maya made a decision that she describes as the most significant of her adult life. It was not dramatic from the outside. She did not leave anything behind. She did not gain anything visible. She stopped defending it. Belief about herself that she had held since she was a child. A belief that love required her to be smaller, to want less, to make herself easier to carry. She had not known she held this belief until Rohan had pressed on it with precision repeatedly across 3 years of conversation until it was impossible to pretend it wasn't there. When she released it, genuinely released it, in her body, not just her mind, something shifted between them. Not a dramatic, a settling, as though whatever had needed to be said between them had finally been said. She told me, "I don't know if he was in my life before this life. I know he found something in me that nothing else could have reached. And when it was reached, when the thing he was there to find was finally found, we both felt it. This is what karmic completion looks like in the middle of an ordinary life. Not cinematic, not dramatic. A quiet, specific, internally verified, settling of something that had been running, unresolved for longer than this lifetime. The thread finally lying flat. Now, a question worth sitting with before we continue. Think about the person whose face appeared in your mind at the beginning of this video, the one who triggered the most recognition as you heard these signs described. Are they still in your life, or did they come and go? Because here is something the research consistently shows, and something that changes everything about how you understand the people who have left your life. Past life connections do not always stay. Some are designed to, some are not. There is a distinction that the ancient teachers made and that modern regression researchers have documented independently between two types of past life connections. The first type is what the Vedic tradition calls a soul companion, the soul that has traveled alongside you across many lifetimes, who appears in different roles, sometimes as a partner, sometimes as a parent or child, sometimes as a close friend, but who returns reliably, whose presence in your life across multiple incarnations reflects an ongoing relationship of shared growth and accumulated trust. These connections tend to feel stable even when they are difficult. There is a quality of permanence to them, the sense that this person is a fixture in your interior landscape in a way that does not depend entirely on the current relationships, circumstances. The second type is what could be called a catalyst connection, a soul that enters your life with a specific purpose, to activate something, to press on something, to force a growth that would not happen without the specific pressure they apply, and then moves on once the purpose has been served. These connections are often the ones that hurt the most, because the intensity of a catalyst connection is frequently mistaken for the quality that defines companion connections. The recognition feels the same, the depth feels the same, but the structure is different. And when the catalyst connection ends, sometimes abruptly, sometimes painfully, sometimes in a way that makes no rational sense given the depth of what was shared, the grief carries a particular quality, not just the loss of the person, the loss of a kind of knowing that only that person carried, the loss of the mirror. If you have experienced a connection that ended in a way that felt disproportionate to its length, that produced a grief larger than the relationship's duration should have warranted, you may have experienced a catalyst connection completing its purpose, not because the love was not real. The love was real, but the love was also at another level functional. It was the delivery mechanism for something your soul needed to encounter in this lifetime. And when the delivery was complete, the connection concluded. This is not comfortable, but it reframes something that would otherwise only be lost into something that is both loss and completion. The people who entered your life with the full weight of past life recognition and then left were not mistakes, were not failures, were not evidence that something went wrong. They were, in the most precise sense, exactly what they were supposed to be. The question to sit with is not, why did they leave? The question is, what did they complete in me while they were here? And there is a third type of past life connection that is worth naming separately, because it is the most complex and the one most often misunderstood. The unfinished connection, a soul from your past that you meet in this life before either of you is ready to do the work the connection requires. The karma is real, the recognition is real, but the capacity for completion in this particular configuration at this particular moment is not yet present. These connections are frequently the most painful because the recognition is undeniable, and yet the relationship cannot hold what the recognition suggests it should. There is a documented phenomenon in regression therapy that researchers call an incomplete life contract, connection between two souls that was planned in the interlife, set in motion across current lifetime, but that encounters conditions in the specific circumstances of this life that prevent the full completion from occurring. Dr. Brian Weiss documented this across dozens of cases to people who carry all the signs of a significant past life connection, the recognition, the intensity, the disproportionate impact, but who cannot build a stable relationship in the present because one or both carries damage from this life that has not yet been addressed. The karma is present, the readiness is not, and this is where the teaching becomes most practical, because incomplete connections do not require grief as their permanent state, they require growth as their response. The soul that is not yet ready to receive what the connection is offering, the one who carries damage that prevents full engagement, that soul's work is not to wait for the right person to arrive again. That soul's work is to become ready to address what the damage produced, to fill the grooves that make genuine connection impossible, to do the interior work that transforms an incomplete contract into a completed one, whether with this soul in this life or in a future iteration the current self cannot see. The ancient teachers were clear on this. Karma does not punish incompleteness. It creates the conditions for completion, and those conditions are recreated across lifetimes, across relationships, across as many configurations as necessary until the soul is ready to receive what the connection was designed to deliver. You are not running out of opportunities. The soul does not run out of opportunities. The question is only whether you will do the work that transforms the next opportunity into a completion rather than another beginning of the same unfinished story. Now let's talk about something practical, because understanding past life connections intellectually is not the same as knowing what to do with them. When you recognize a past life connection in your life through one or more of the signs we have described, what is the right response? Not the spiritual performance response, not the response that looks wise from the outside, the actually useful response. There are three things, and they apply regardless of whether the connection is warm or difficult, ongoing or concluded, a companion soul, or a catalyst. The first, pay attention to what this specific person activates in you that others do not their qualities, what they activate, the specific emotional territory that comes alive in their presence and does not come alive in the same way with others. That territory is the karmic curriculum. That is what the connection was arranged to address. Whatever is present in you when you are with this person, or when you think about them, that is the data, not about them, about you. The second practical response: resist the urge to define the relationship through conventional categories. Most people encounter a past life connection and immediately try to place it in a familiar structure. This is a romantic partner. This is a friendship. This is a mentor. This is someone I should stay away from. The categories are not wrong, but they are insufficient. They describe the form of the relationship. They do not describe the function. Past life connections frequently take forms that do not match their function. The most significant karmic work of your life might come through a friendship rather than a romance, through a professional relationship rather than an intimate one, through a connection that lasts 3 months rather than 30 years. The length and the form are not the measure of significance. The depth of the change produced is the measure. In trying to force a past life connection into a form that the current life's circumstances do not support, insisting that a catalyst connection should become a companion connection, or that an unfinished connection should be completed before either soul is ready, produces exactly the kind of suffering that karma does not require and life does not benefit from. Let the form be what it is. Pay attention to the function. The function is where the growth lives. The third practical response: bring consciousness to the patterns, the connection activates. This is the most specific and the most work intensive of the three. And it is the one that actually changes something. When you notice what a past life connection activates in you, and you will notice because the activation is impossible to miss in a connection of this kind. The next step is to bring that activation into the light, not to manage it, not to perform a more evolved response to it, to look at it directly and ask what it is, where it lives in your body, how long it has been there, what it is protecting you from, because what past life connections activate in you is never random. It is always with the precision that characterizes all karmic work, exactly the groove that needs to be addressed in this chapter of your soul's journey. The person is not causing the activation, they are revealing it. That is the single most important distinction in understanding past life connections. The soul in front of you did not create your own. They are positioned by history, by karma, by the specific configuration of what you have shared across lifetimes to make the wound impossible to continue ignoring. And the wound that cannot be ignored is the wound that can be healed. Maya, in her third year with Rohan, made the choice that changed everything, not because he did anything different, because she stopped defending the belief the relationship was pressing on. She made the wound conscious, and in making it conscious and feeling its full weight, its full history, its full cost, she found that it no longer needed to run. The groove in the specific language of this tradition became shallow enough to step out of. That is karmic completion, not healing in the conventional sense. Recognition so full and so honest that the pattern can no longer maintain its grip. Let me give you something before we close that is not about other people, because this entire video has been about the souls you have met and will meet, and what those meetings mean. But there is a direction to this teaching that points inward, not outward, and that direction is the most important one. The signs we have describe the recognition, the intensity, the disproportionate impact are not just things you are looking for in others. They are things others are experiencing in you. You are someone's past life connection. You are someone's catalyst. You are the mirror that is positioned to reveal something that no one else in that person's life can reach. And how you show up in that role, whether you show up with a consciousness the role requires, or whether you move through the connection in the same unconscious patterns that have characterized your karmic work before, determines whether you complete the karma or extend it, because karma travels in both directions. Every connection you are in is not just about what the other person is here to teach you. It is also about what you are here to teach them, what you are positioned to reveal, what your specific presence in their life is designed to activate and make impossible to ignore. The person who cannot stop thinking about you, who finds that you press on something in them that no one else reaches, is carrying the same ancient thread that you are carrying, the same recognition, the same weight of something unfinished, which means the quality of your consciousness in the relationship matters not just for your growth, but for theirs. This is the deepest implication of the karmic framework. It is not a teaching about what the universe does to you. It is a teaching about the responsibility that comes with having traveled through many lives with other souls. You are not just a recipient of the past life connections in your life. You are an agent of them. And the more consciously you show up, the more you bring awareness to what your presence activates, the more honestly you engage with what the connections in your life are trying to complete. The more the karma moves, not just yours, theirs. This is the part of the teaching that the ancient teachers came back to again and again, not as an obligation, as a recognition. We are not navigating karma alone. We are navigating it together, across lifetimes, across configurations, across an arrangement of souls that is far more deliberate and far more intricate than any single incarnation can show us. The person who triggered the most recognition, as you heard these signs described. What are you in their life? What have you been across the lifetimes you have shared? What are you here to complete between you? Not just what are they here to complete in you? These are not rhetorical questions. They are the actual questions, the ones that, held honestly and with patience, begin to shift something that logic and willpower have not been able to touch. Tonight before you sleep, one thing, not a meditation, not a ritual, something more specific. Bring to mind the person or the 2 or 3 people who triggered the most recognition as you heard these signs, not their story, their presence, the specific quality of what it felt like to be around them, what it activated in you, what it showed you about yourself that you could not see clearly before they arrived. Hold that without judgment, without the story of what happened, without the narrative of who was right and who was wrong, just the activation, what was pressed, what was revealed, and then ask, not them, the connection itself. What did you come here to complete? Not what did they do to you? What did the connection come to complete? The answer that comes will probably surprise you, will probably not be about them. It never is. The most significant past life connections in your life, the ones that produce the most recognition, the most intensity, the most inexplicable, knowing they were not primarily about the other person. They were about the parts of you that only those specific connections could reach, and those parts of you, the ones that have been pressed on, exposed, activated across the lifetimes you have traveled, are not your weakest places. They are your oldest lessons, the ones your soul chose this life to finally, completely, irreversibly learn. You are not who you were when those connections found you. The recognition changed you. The intensity changed you. The specific gravity of those relationships, what they pressed on, what they refused to let you hide from, changed you in ways that nothing else could have. That is not something to grieve, even when it hurt, even when the loss was real. That is the karmic curriculum, working exactly as it was designed to work. You chose this from the clarity of a place wiser than the one you are operating from right now. You arranged these meetings. You agreed to these recognitions. You knew before you arrived in this body what those connections would press on and what they would complete. Trust what your soul arranged. Do the work it came to do. And if this video opened something in you, if one or more of these signs landed with a specificity that surprised you, the next video in this series is where we go deeper. We look at what happens when a past life connection reaches its completion, what it feels like from the inside, and what becomes possible in a relationship and in a life when the ancient thread is finally fully resolved. Subscribe so you are there when it goes live. Not because this channel needs the number, because the conversation we are building here goes somewhere that most content is afraid to go. You have already shown you are not afraid. See you in the next one.